Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this May 22nd edition of Smart Church at Amplified. I was about to say at noon. Smart Church Amplified. I see that you guys are coming in. Good evening to everyone. I'm grateful for all of you. You know, this community is something special to me. It's just amazing how we have built something that not only blesses us, but blesses anybody that touches what we do here on Wednesdays at noon, on Wednesdays at 7 o'clock. I certainly hope that you have had a rewarding day. If your day is coming to a close, or if you're just getting started, man, I pray God will bless you in God sized ways, not in arrow type ways, God sized ways as you move forward into what we'll call your day. And shout out to all of you who have been going back and forth to graduations, man. I know that this can be a taxing season, but it is also a celebration, a time of celebration for all that we have invested in our people, especially our young people, as they pursued education wherever they were. And we always appreciate the graduates. Thank you for sticking it out until the very end. You got it done. You ought to pat yourself on the back and celebrate yourself if nobody else will celebrate you. Um, this evening, we are going to have a special guest with us, Sister Latoya Jefferson from the Butterfly Society here in Baton Rouge, who does wonderful work as it relates to domestic violence. This afternoon, when we talked at 12, uh, inspired by the Diddy Puff Daddy, Sean Combs, God knows what he's calling himself. And I don't say that to be funny, but he does change his name a lot. That horrible video that we saw, just no excuse of how he beat that woman and dragged the woman and kicked her twice, missed her the first time and turned around and tried to kick her again. It was just ridiculous. And I thought about starting our time together by showing that video, but it was just too graphic for our good. If you saw it once, you saw it. If you didn't miss anything. It was just horrible. So we took this afternoon to look at a biblical perspective of what domestic abuse looks like. But we looked at all types of abuse. And if you haven't had a chance to see it yet, you'll want to go back and check it out because, as always, there was some real teaching happening, some great lessons for us in the chat box. You guys do a wonderful job of expanding our minds and making us think beyond where we thought we were going. So thank you for what you do. But tonight we'll continue the conversation. I'll teach for maybe, uh, I don't know, 30, 35 minutes or so, and then we'll bring in Miss Jefferson and let her talk to us about what is happening here in Baton Rouge, because I don't know if you know it, but we always averaging around 20, probably 25 deaths due to domestic violence every year for the last few years. And a city Baton Rouge's size, that shouldn't happen. Not to mention the people that we know about who don't die but are still dealing with those kinds of relationships, and then the ones who are suffering in silence. One of the things that we talked about today is that 4 in 10 people, 4 out of 10, who attend church or synagogue or temple on a weekly basis, on a regular basis, are caught up in a domestic abuse situation. Either they are the abuser or they are being abused. And we know those numbers are skewed because people are not going to answer those questions honestly all the time. But that number is staggering. 4 in 10. That means if there are 100 people, let's just use where we are, Elm Grove, right? We're in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. If there's 100 people sitting in church with us, according to those statistics, there's a good chance that 40 of them are involved in some kind of abusive type relationship. Jump that number up to 200, you're talking about 80. That's an awful lot of people. And I don't think those numbers, if they are off, you would believe there is a spider spinning a web just above my camera. I'm going to leave it alone, let it do what it does. Um, um, and those numbers may be higher because we know that there are a lot of people who deal with abusive situations and they don't tell anybody. So it could be even more than that, dealing with this scourge on our society. And I just believe that the church not only should have something to say about it, but should do something about it. And so I'm not just trying to have a good conversation tonight and for us to show how smart we are, like always, but even more so tonight. I hope that we are encouraged to use our gifts and talents that God has given to us to form some kind of ministry that we can campaign against domestic violence. Nobody, absolutely nobody, should be involved in an abusive relationship. I don't care if it's a child, man, woman, whatever. There is no excuse. And so we'll walk through it and look at it biblically, and then before we say goodnight, we'll look at some statistics and what can be done. All of that being said, join me please in the book of Judges, Judges chapter 19, uh, the first four verses, and then verses 22 through 25. Judges chapter 19, verses 1 through 4, and then verses 22 through 25. A disturbing story. And I know I have actually read my Bible from Genesis 1 all the way through Revelations 21, but this story slipped by me and it disturbs me every time I read it. Judges chapter 19, verses 1 through 4, and then verses 22 through 25. I have the New International Version. In those days, Israel had no king. Now a Levite who lived in a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim took a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah, but she was unfaithful to him. She left him and went back to her parents' home in Bethlehem, Judah. After she had been there 4 months, her husband went to her to persuade her to return. He had with him his servant and 2 donkeys. She took him into her parents' home, and when her father saw him, he gladly welcomed him. His father in law, the woman's father, prevailed on him to stay, so he remained with him 3 days, eating and drinking and sleeping there. Now skip down to verse 22. While they were enjoying themselves, some of the wicked men of the city surrounded the house, pounding on the door. They shouted to the old man who owned the house, "Bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with him." The owner of the house went outside and said to them, "No, my friends, don't be so vile. Since this man is my guest, don't do this outrageous thing." Verse 24. "Look, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. I'll bring them out to you now, and you can use them and do to them whatever you wish. But as for this man, don't do such an outrageous thing." But the men would not listen to him. So the man took his concubine and sent her outside to them, and they raped her and abused her throughout the night. And at dawn, they let her go. That's the reading of God's word. I promise you, I didn't leave anything out and I didn't make anything up. Can you imagine such a situation among the people of God? And then to have it recorded in our sacred scripture. Now, those of us who believe the Bible to be true um, have to believe that, yes, even this situation happened among God's people. Remember, this is the ancient Israelites. These are the people who are not too many generations crossing from crossing the Jordan River into the Promised Land, and so these people know God, and yet we find this kind of behavior and this kind of abuse among the people of God. So let's look at it. First, if you're taking notes, you'll want to write Judges chapter 17, Judges chapter 17, verse 6. It explains the whole book of Judges. It's not a book we deal with a lot. We know that this was kind of an intermediate period where they are between going into the promised land, the so-called promised land. Let's always remember that. And the king or monarchy era, and that starts with Saul. But 17 verse 6 ends by saying the people strayed away from God and they did whatever they wanted to do. I want you to catch that. When the people were not under God, the people were out there wilding out, doing whatever came to mind. Now, I am sure that it was not everybody. I'm sure that there is always a remnant that is faithful to their covenant relationship with God. Let's stick a pin right there. Always remember that. Even when it seems like the world is going to hell in a handbasket, God reminds us, even through sacred scripture with Elijah and in our own personal walk with God, that God always has somebody out there. There are always people, excuse me, there are always people who are faithful to their relationship with God. That's what God had to tell Elijah, right? Boy, please, I still have thousands who have not bowed down to Baal. And when we think we are all alone, God, I'm the only one, right? Everybody around me is doing dirt. And it looks like they're prospering, they happy, they're at peace, they sleeping at night. And here I am trying to serve you. I can't sleep. Look like things won't come together for me. Always remember, dear heart, that God always, the whole, remember the elders used to say, God always has a ram in the bush. That's what I'm talking about, right? There is always a remnant or a group of people who are left who are still on the Lord's side. So, Judges is a book of Israel trying to become Israel, trying to find itself after settling into what Israel calls the promised land. But we have to question because they committed genocide, just like Israel, modern day Israel is doing. We'll talk about that another time. So folded within the story of the Judges is this story in chapter 19, and you have to pay close attention to the text and pay close attention to the Hebrew to really get an understanding of what's happening. Since our sacred scripture or most scriptures are mostly written from a patriarchal point of view, that is from male men's point of view, and most of it is written to us from a top down. No, not written, interpreted for us from a top down. If there were a hierarchy, right, it would be like the people at the top of the ladder telling the people at the bottom of the ladder what to do. You have to be careful to pay attention, especially in Judges chapter 19, to context and to what the Hebrew is actually saying, rather than believing interpretations, and especially false interpretations of what the text is saying to us. So the text begins by telling us about a man who is a Levite. That means he's from the tribe of Levi. You probably know that already. I don't want to insult you. But Levi means attached. And you know that the Levites were the people who served God in the temple, if you will, in the gathering place, in the holiest of places. Um, and so this man is a descendant of that particular tribe and probably had the same connection as his ancestors. That means he's connected to his people, to his tribe. But more importantly, he is connected to God by serving God, by handling the rituals, by handling the education of the people, by taking care of the legal matters that came before the temple. And so this gentleman probably had a special relationship with God. Yet, we can tell based on just what we read, but when you go back and read the whole chapter for yourself, you will see that even though this man is in the temple, right, in religion, in relationship with God and with his tribe, the tribe of Levi, uh, even though this man probably has personal relationship with God that is not just about performing the rituals, we see that this gentleman is involved. And I say that loosely, gentleman. We see that this man is involved in an abusive relationship. Look at what we read from 22 to 25. When the men there wanted to abuse him, wanted to attack him and rape him, really, this man pushed his wife out there and left her out there with those people all night long. And when you read the text for yourself, you'll notice that when morning came, he intended to step over her and keep going, but he noticed she was dead. Imagine that. Here's somebody who's serving in the church in that kind of a relationship, living like that, abusing one of God's children in that manner. And it doesn't just stop in pre-antiquity. Baby, we have to be sure to know that some of the people who are preaching to us, praying for us, singing to us, helping us to our seats, handling the money, sweeping the floors, serving in ministry, probably say they love God, but are involved in a relationship where they are being abused or they are the abuser. Women, men, and children. Let's see. Sister Nancy Dennis says Joseph did not bow to the woman. Oh, yeah, who tried to seduce him and then lied on him. That's right. Potiphar's wife with her low down self. You're exactly right. Thank you for bringing that to the forefront. Um, so yeah, here's a man whose title means that he is attached. The very title he walks around with, we don't even have his name, but the title he's given says he's attached to God and he's attached to his people for generations and generations. And here he is living like that. Let's take it a step further. It says that he had a concubine. Now, this is not, see, this is where we got to pay attention to what the Hebrew is saying, what the context of the situation. This does not mean that she, that he just goes to her when he wants to have sex, that she's the side piece, and it does not mean that she is shacking with him, right? That they having sex out of wedlock, that he just living in her place or she's living in his place. That's not what that word means. That word for concubine in this context, right? Because there are two words for concubine. One does mean what I just explained, but the other word, and the word that is used here, the Hebrew word that is used here, means that she is his wife. issue is it's a polygamous arrangement. And so he has a main or a first wife in the hierarchy, and she is secondary. The lady in our text, we're not giving her name. The lady in our text is secondary. Now, don't judge, right? It's legal in their society. Um, it's obviously acceptable, but um, this lady is like wife number 2 or 3 or 4. She's just not the main one. Um, and so we are told, or we are encouraged to infer that there's an issue between them. Here's where we have to know the text again. It says that she cheated on him, right? That's not what the Hebrew says. The Hebrew says there was a serious disagreement. There was an intense argument. There was a clash happening there. She was not unfaithful in terms of um, she was not unfaithful in terms of going with another man. She was unfaithful according to patriarchy, that she had the nerve to stand up for herself and argue with this man or clash with this man, or whatever happened. We're not told for sure, but we do know that there's a problem. So much so that the sister removes herself from his home and goes back to her mother and father's house. Of course, the Bible, again, from the male lens, that's the father's house. So she goes back to her father's house. She separates herself from the situation. We don't know if it was dangerous for her. We don't know if she was so mad she left him. We don't know what the situation, but we know that whatever was happening in that house, Sister Girl said, I am not putting up with this. I'm not staying here for this. And after, again, we have to read the Hebrew, after either 4 months or a year and 4 months, he decides he's going to get his wife. She's been gone long enough in his eyes. And the book says that he sweet talks her. In fact, the text says he spoke to her heart. Right? We don't know. Maybe it was both their faults, and he apologized for whatever he did, and she apologized for whatever she did. Maybe it was an abusive situation, and he went there and promised, I will never do it again. I just get angry sometimes. You know how hard it is for me out there on the job. We don't know. We do know that he went to talk sweetly to his wife. Good evening. Hey, Keisha. Um, and she obviously listened because she invited him into her parents' home, into her father's house. Book says that he took a servant with him, and he took two donkeys with him, which meant he meant to stay until he talked that woman into going back home with him. Sister Nancy Dennis, Whoopi Goldberg, who played Celie, on The Color Purple, became a silent sufferer until Danny Glover's mystery came and assisted her out of a mentally abusive relationship. That is such the perfect example of what may be happening sitting next to us or right in front of us or ministering to us every Sunday. Such the perfect example. That woman going through hell, right? And people probably knew it and nobody did anything. So true. So true. You're right. You're right, T. That is the perfect example. So this brother planned to stay there as long as it takes. Let me back up too. He's also a wealthy man, right? Because he has more than one wife. How you take care of more than one wife unless you have some coin, right? Unless you have some money. So he's a wealthy man with more than one wife, taking care of this woman. They fall out for whatever reason, and he ends up at at the father's house to bring her back home. Now, the parts that I skipped, one of the parts in the chapter says that every time he tried to leave, the girl's father would not let him leave, talked him into staying another day. It's late. You ought to stay. Sit down. Let's have a meal together. And by the time they ate the meal, well, you here, you may as well spend the night until finally the man says, I got to go home. So they start on their way, but evening catches them, darkness catches them. Um, and so they meet an old man and they go to stay at the old man's house. That's where verse 22 picks up. The abuse does not happen at the father's house. The abuse happens at this old man's house that they meet, right? And as the story goes, in order to save himself, coward, he threw his wife out there among ravenous wolves. So look at it this way. When we talk about abuse, whatever, and somebody brought up today about how those parents let that child mesh with the sofa in there. How in the world do you do that? Right? But wherever we meet abuse, it is all about domination. It is all about control. This man who used his wife for human trafficking, right? Threw her out there to the wolves, uh, was actually exercising and demonstrating for us the misuse of power that is given to him by the social structures in which they lived. Make no mistake about it, right? This sister had no uh, alternative, if you will. The husband says, go out there, just like when Abraham and Sarah abused Hagar, right? Had no choice. Seely, in the example given to us from The Color Purple, her daddy gave her away to a man when she was just a child, right? Had no choice in the situation. Think about this. God gives us all power, right? We like that. We remember, we like to recite 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Power is dangerous in the hands of somebody that does not have love in their heart, as the church says. Got to have love in your heart, uh, and also operating from a sound mind. We all know crazy people who have been put in seats of authority, privilege and authority, that could not handle it, right? That made life miserable for people because they had power, but they did not have love, and they definitely did not exercise a sound mind. Remember our old definition of power. Power is knowledge, that is knowing what to do. Power is knowledge is combined with ability, that is the capacity to do and act. And then knowledge and ability are combined with authority, right? It's time for our sister to come in. Are combined with authority. So knowledge, ability, and authority equal to power. But when power is given and it is abused and it is misused, you get situations like Hitler and the abuse that he reigned on, right? Jewish people in Germany. You get situations like Jim Crow, where Black people were told to stay in your place, and if you step out of your place, then we'll lynch you. Your situation like uh, the millionaires today, when young people are trying to express themselves on college campuses, billionaires and millionaires, big donors are telling college presidents to take away their First Amendment rights, send the police on them, and then the police abuse their power by attacking attacking those young people. That's an abuse. That's abuse, misuse of power. That is violence against people. You also get, let's see, what about 46 minus one and all of his minions who have made it clear that if he gets reelected, they are going to put Project 2025 in place and um, uh, send millions of people back to their country, many into harmful situations, right? If he gets into power, he is deregulating everything. If you die, you just die. I mean, he is really tripping. That's an abuse. And can't forget January 6th, right? Had control of those over those people, influence and impact, sent them to destroy the nation's capital. Let us not forget, right? Baby Trump, right down the street from where I am. You can step out onto Zion Street and see the state capitol from where I am. And just today, he and a woman from Denham Springs convinced the state Senate to give him authority to appoint all boards and college presidents as well. Public schools, of course, right? Can you think about that for a second? Talk about an abuse of power. This man who acts like 46 minus one does wants the ability to control every board in our state. So think about the levee board. Think about the levee board in New Orleans. Just yesterday, he refused to appoint a mechanical engineering expert, internationally known, and he will probably fill that seat with someone who has no expertise, like some great big donor to him or something. Now, what's going to happen when the levee breaks, or when it looks like the levee is going to break again in New Orleans? That's an abuse of power, right? And of course, I'm still looking for our sister to come in. Of course, domestic violence is an abuse of knowledge and ability and authority. It is a supreme attempt to dominate someone's life. Think about that. Someone uh, who has trusted another or trusted you, and I don't mean you, of course, and you abuse and mistreat them, therefore destroying the covenant, that's trust, the covenant relationship. That is of the worst order. That somebody would, when we say trust, you're really submitting yourself, making yourself vulnerable for another person. And they decide that they're going to mistreat and misuse, little dictator, that's right, Brother Dom, and just throw the trust out of the window and take advantage of you. It happens every day right under our nose. And it's not just physical, it is not just sexual, it is also emotional, it is also physical, it is also mental, and it is also psychological. How many people do we know that we know something is wrong because they don't think anything of themselves? They're always degrading themselves, right? Always tearing themselves down, never holding their head up. That's after a history of somebody abusing them, right? Maybe never ever touched them, but always taught them that you are no good. Always taught them that you will never amount to anything, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be an authority figure. Maybe it's a sister or a brother, a coworker, somebody down the street, a friend who constantly and consistently taught that person that their life is not worth living. I don't know if you saw the story about the little 10-year-old boy in North Carolina uh, 10 years old, but took his own life because he just could not take the bullying anymore. 10, right? Not 30, 10. That is the abuse of trust, the ripping asunder of a covenant relationship. It happens. Think about the spiritual leaders, Catholic and just trying to make sure, Catholic and Protestant spiritual leaders who abuse the sheep, right? Sleeping with the women in the church or sleeping with the men in the church. Those who prey on the children, I always say they're supposed to be PRAY, and they are PREY on the sheep, abusing, right? There's a severe trust factor there. You my spiritual leader. And here you are trying to take down my clothes and my underwear. Um, Parents, right? Parents that can't control themselves and beat their children. And the number of times we see where a baby has been shaken to death, a helpless baby. That's abuse to the nth degree, domestic violence. And then we talk about supervisors, teachers, coaches, and then the ultimate, your intimate partner. The one that you are intimate with is the one who's destroying you mentally, emotionally, psychologically, and maybe even physically. The church cannot, we cannot, when I say the church, I mean us. We cannot sit back, act like we don't hear anything or see anything, because every time we see statistics roll, baby, you best believe that some of those people in the that are counted in those statistics are sitting next to you talking about amen, clapping their hands every time. I keep trying to see. The sister should have rolled in by now. Give me 1 second. Let me text and see if she's trying to get in. So the reason I thought this was important because you know, we saw live and in color, right, in the Diddy video, and then it made me think about how many in our church or churches all over the world that are sitting there, and then God just says, "Well, what you gonna do about it?" Like Joe Madison used to say, right? What are you gonna do about it? One may not be able to make much difference, but we certainly can educate people and show people the way out of those situations. That's why I wanted the lady from, she's having connection issues. Tell you what, we'll just try it next week because I don't want to hold you guys while she works it out. So let's just cut it off there. I hope that, oh, here she is. She's saying she's here. I don't see her. I don't want to try to work this out while you guys are here. So we'll cut it off and we'll pick it up and let her come on next week for us. Please pray about this situation, such that we can do our part to make it happen, to help people. Um, Let me give you the announcements before we go. Here we go. The announcements. Don't forget, of course, scholarship applications are due on June. I'm sorry, June 2nd. We're also taking applications for our summer youth. work program. On June 2nd is Black Business Sunday. We'll have with us Blooms from Brianna. She does floral arrangements, Gigi's Yummy Lemonade and Cakes. I think that's self explanatory. And Jewelry and Accessories by Lois Jackson. Also on June 8th, our Abundant Living Ministry will sponsor a career and college fair. Please help us spread the word. That was poorly attended last year, and there's some great information to help our children. And listen, we can start talking to our elementary age students about going to college. You don't have to wait until they're graduating from high school. And so if you're connected to young people, please make sure that they get there. That will be at Elm Grove on June the 8th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Let's see. And the Abundant Living Ministry, again, is sponsoring a a blood drive for us. That will happen. That's what I get for trying to read in real time. The blood drive is on June 2nd. June 2nd, that's first Sunday, is the blood drive immediately after church. Please consider saving a life. It's been in the news lately that they're short on blood. And there will be a youth and young adult financial literacy class on June 15th. So this is a busy time for our church, trying to get a lot accomplished. And don't forget that after church on this coming Sunday, we ask that you give us about 10 minutes to have family discussion. You know, sometimes we have to turn the cameras off and talk as family. So please be sure to stay no more than about 10 minutes with us. Thank you so much. I apologize that we couldn't connect Miss Jefferson. We're going to work it out so that she can come in next week and give us what she planned to give to us, and then we'll move forward in the lesson after that. Again, I love all of you and thank you for your patience. Thank you for creating community here. I know this one was kind of heavy and thought provoking, but I think that God meant for it to be that way. I love you. Take care.